Chris, we have figured out a way to go live on Facebook at the same time. Look at us go. Look at us go. You're about to be a superstar.
Hi, Phyllis.
Hi,
Annie
Phyllis.
says hi.
I wanted to meet you.
Hi, Annie. I'm so sorry, but you were in the background. I was like, oh my gosh, Chris's wife is gorgeous. Here's the problem. He's not a bad looking guy, but like, so nice to meet you.
You too.
I know you're intelligent and all those other wonderful things as well, but like, that's what. How's your day going?
Good. Done with work.
Yes, right. These days are so funky, given that there's no like start to the day and end to the day. So
yeah, I work at GE Dunn and we're back in the office. But our office is closed tomorrow because they're anticipating, like, they're not sure what's going to happen downtown because we're right by the police headquarters. So
fair.
It's like once we got set up, now they're like, don't come back. I'm like, whew, tell me what to do.
Yeah. Well, stay flexible, stay on your toes. You're making it work.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. We're gonna get that backyard set up soon because now, like, it's warm out, a little too warm, but
a little too warm. Yeah,
we have tailgate tents. We can make this work.
The shade.
Yes. Nice to see you.
Good to meet you too.
He's wanting to meet you.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris. This is my +1. You're muted.
Hey, what's up? What's going on, man?
How you doing, man? Like that shirt.
Hey, thank you. I told her, I told Phyllis that underneath this shirt is some baseball, basketball shorts or something like that. So I'm not gonna be standing up.
Yeah, I feel right in. I got on the Nikes and the Nike socks.
You do actually have a.
Just keep it below, right?
You know, we gotta come up with like, it's like the mullet work from home outfit, right? Like party at the top, like business on top, party at the bottom. It's kind of the direction folks are going.
So what's your role in this whole thing? What are you doing behind camera?
I'm the broadcast technician right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you got the teleprompters going.
Exactly. I'm talking with ABC and all the live networks and.
Well, of course, right? You know, got Reuters on the line. I think BBC's trying to get an access.
100%. So I'm gonna hop back into the booth, but really nice to meet you.
The booth. That's funny, honey. All right, I'm gonna mute again just in case I get some last minute. Chris, I'm ready when you are, friend.
Ready to kick off and begin?
Yeah. Well, here's the fun part. I think we'll give folks a couple minutes to log in.
Okay.
So we can just continue to catch up.
Okay. You want to wait maybe and do our kickoff 5 minutes past?
Yeah, I think that's what makes sense. So what are you watching on television?
Okay, if I can be extremely real right now, I don't know if I can be, but there's been
real enough.
Sometimes we get pulled into some, questionable television, some My 600-Pound Life, some Naked and Afraid on Discovery. I mean, and sometimes it's just the normal stuff like the Great British Baking Show. It just kind of goes everywhere.
I was not expecting that variety of television. I think that's right. I will say that what did I just watch? So I just watched actually one of those. So what I need to stop watching is those multi-series crime shows that they put on, like, they're right now all over Hulu. But I get it from my mother. Like, she loves these, like,
there's too many of them.
Special.
There's like, you got NCIS of like every city now. You got Hawaii, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. And I'm like, who's watching these things? Obviously you're a sucker.
Like, we are the ones that are just getting those views up. Did you catch The Last Dance?
No. Wait, like
old
school movie?
You're tall, but I know you don't like ball, right? You're not a huge basketball.
No.
You're not a huge sports guy.
I'm not a sports guy. I don't know why.
Yeah. Have you picked up your hobbies?
I mean, with finishing the house and building the house, the hobby's been just trying to get it done, so to speak. What are you drinking? You drinking coffee at this hour?
I am not drinking coffee because if I have coffee after 2:00, I go from charming to annoying. So I actually have to monitor my caffeine intake, particularly to just keep my household happy. So I am just drinking water in a mug. Just like,
yeah, that's real talk.
That
right
was
there.
Clean, and it was right there, and so I just grabbed that.
You can't be too jittery.
Yeah.
Sorts of high pressure interviews,
Right? Hey, Chris, I know you're gonna hit me with the hard.
I'm gonna have to grill you on some tough topics. I think I'm gonna have to take this totally off script and go into the weeds.
Go for it.
What have you been?
We're also on Facebook Live officially, which
welcome Facebook.
And I'm also on Instagram. I'm being told. And I'm live on those things as well. So hi to the Facebook and Instagram family. All of my friends are making fun of me at this moment because I am not very social media savvy. So I've been told
you got a team.
Terminology. I do have a team that helps me be cool.
Right. You just hire a team. I think I'm getting right at this time. I think ABC is wanting to join. Yeah, I think we got CBS on the line. ESPN even for some reason is tuning in. The sports potential of this interview is very high.
I would love to do a sports interview. Like, I think, I hope I'm successful in August. And if my first interview was at ESPN, I think that would be pretty awesome.
I mean, you can hope for it, I guess.
Awesome. So my team is giving me the we can go, because apparently folks have been successful logging in. So look.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the virtual town hall with Phyllis Hardwick. So thank you all for tuning in. Obviously, you know which one's Phyllis probably at this point. But I'll just give a quick introduction of who I am and why I am here with the honor to interview Phyllis and do this town hall. But my name is Chris Binkley, and I am thrilled to be the moderator for this evening's town hall, albeit virtual because of circumstances and things. So I am a huge Northeast community advocate. I get the privilege of serving as the president of the Neighborhood Pendleton Heights Association Board. And that's actually where Phyllis and I got to meet. We were at a community cocktail one night and just was struck by your enthusiasm and smart, capable person. And then I learned you were running for office, and I said, hey, I want to help in any way I can. So feel honored to be able to kind of lead this interview and town hall. First, I'd like to thank everybody else who is tuning in via all the different platforms. Thank you for setting aside an hour or so of your evening And I'm just going to do a couple quick housekeeping things of just what to expect, how this format will go. And then we will jump right into some questions that I have prepared for you, Phyllis. And then also we will be taking questions throughout this time. We'll kind of do like first half, second half. First half, we'll have a discussion, and then second half, we will hopefully have received some questions from everybody who's tuning in. And then we will, with the help of some of the team that Phyllis has, sift through those and find some good ones to ask you. So please do submit those as we go along. This will kind of be webinar style. So you should see our pretty nice faces, but everyone else is, I think, in kind of a mute status, if I have that right, Phyllis.
They are, yeah.
So if you want to have your voice heard, get in the chat and let us know. And I think that's about all I have for housekeeping items. So how about we just start with this, Phyllis? Tell us a little bit about yourself, yeah, just start with that.
Absolutely. So 60637, that's the zip code I'm from. I'm sure my mom is on the webinar. So hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
And if you pop my zip code into Google, there's a couple things that'll come up. I think the first thing will come up is that my neighborhood has some of the challenges that we associate with Chicago. It is known for being a relatively dangerous neighborhood. The second thing that'll pop up is that the local high school that would have been my neighborhood high school if I would have attended that school, 1 out of every 7 girls was pregnant or currently had a child during my 8th grade year when we were contemplating school choices for me. So while those are the things that Google will tell you, I don't think it captures my neighborhood at all. It should tell you about Miss Tony, who made me my first lemon meringue pie. I had no idea what I was eating because the top of a lemon meringue pie is the most fascinating thing you'll ever see in your life, but it was delicious and showed me that she cared. I wish that it would told you about Miss Ryapel, who was my 6th grade writing resource teacher, who gave me a signed autographed copy from one of her favorite authors and told me that I can not only read stories, I can correct my own. So, you know, I was birthed in this beautiful, resounding community and neighborhood that actually Pendleton Heights reminded me a bit of. This morning I had neighbors handing out flyers for me in the 90-degree heat. Because collective responsibility and collective action, I think, is a fabric of neighborhoods, and I'm proud to say that that's my legacy. So when I was thinking about all of these skills I had captured over my career, I started as a teacher, actually at Northeast Middle in the neighborhood, back when it was K-8. And when I went into nonprofit management and then finished my career, when I say finished, I am transitioning out of that career finance. You know, that business acumen, that love of kids and that love of community, I thought would be very, very helpful in a different arena. So when I was looking around trying to figure out what that was, being able to impact and make us have stronger communities, stronger schools, and right now more than ever, a stronger workforce has made me decide to run for office. So beyond that, I'm kind of a nerd, but I like to think I'm cool. I was a big on jigsaw puzzles before they became cool. I know there's an article in the Star today about jigsaw puzzles being sold out on the walls of my home. There are all kinds of jigsaw puzzles that I have put together and framed. I love sports, and I am completely in love with the city that has made me, which is Kansas City. So a little bit about me, Chris. I know that was
wonderful.
I also can talk, right? Like you may.
Hey, yes, I knew that the moment I met you. I love it. You're conversational like I am, and so yeah, we're kindred spirits on that front. I also have to just say, when it comes to communities that are not without their blemishes, it doesn't still remove the special nature of what made me love Pendleton Heights was the connectedness of the people, the resourcefulness of the people, the spirit. But yeah, we've got crime of opportunity. We've got some things that we're still, working on. So it sounds like a neighborhood where you currently live is very similar to the place that you grew up. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, Pendleton Heights is a little bit further on some of the antidotes to some of the challenges I had in my neighborhood back home. I do think that we have a relationship with our local police, and we've seen some dramatic improvements on some of those challenges here. But like, if I look out my front door, there are 5 different languages on my street. And then if I go out my back door, I have my ORD crew which is a whole bunch of couples that are under 35, no kids, and a dog, right? Spencer and I do not have a dog. We do borrow a dog from time to time, our canine nephew, Romeo, which the other dogs on the Ord crew have gotten to meet. But yeah, it's a thriving community where there's love and care of one another. And I would be completely honored to represent it and the rest of the district as well.
Wonderful. I want to ask just pointedly, because I think it's due to anyone who's going to vote for someone in an elected position. It's very helpful to know where you're coming from and some of your passions, but what was the thing or the trigger point that really launched you into saying, you know what, I would like to go towards an elected office? What was that moment?
Chris, that's a fantastic question, and it's a good one. So I was spending my time on civic work, right? So I was on boards that was impacting education, early childhood, and actually women and girls in sports. And it seemed like every time we wanted to do something, Jefferson City was in the way, right? I would get, we can't do that because that's against the rules in Jefferson City. Or I would get the opposite. In order to do this thing we wanted to do, we had to make sure that it fit a Jefferson City policy. And it really didn't feel like our state legislature was a partner to what we wanted to accomplish, but instead an impediment. And so I've never been a person that complains just for the sake of complaining. I wanted to turn that complaints into action. And it's not okay that folks who are trying to make our community here in Kansas City better on guns, on education, on blight, on all of those things that we care about have to work around Jefferson City, which is supposed to be an avenue for improvement for us. And so that's why we love to go there and just work a little bit harder to get that done.
Thanks so much for kind of kicking us off with that. I've got a few things that I've scribbled down that I'd like to ask you about, and maybe that'll kind of lead into our first part of the town hall. Just as a way of reminder, folks who are listening or are with us, please go ahead and put questions you have in the type it in kind of section. But I wanted to start with something that obviously has impacted probably every single person that is listening right now, and that is this virus that has shown up on our doorstep of America a couple months ago. It's not an overstatement to say that it's probably impacted every single person, although it be different. Some maybe have lost a job, some still are employed, some have been affected by the health issues that come with it, some haven't. I think the effects have fallen largely very differently, but could you talk with me just a little bit about, as this relates to how it's affected jobs in the workforce? If you were to be elected, how would you work to rebuild and to improve the workforce within this area?
That's a great question. And I think that there's a couple things we need to do. One, we actually have to tackle the virus. I know it's gotten warm outside. I know that folks want to get out. And I also know that folks are protesting a very serious issue right now. But the virus is still here. And we've had 3 days now where we've had triple number reported cases of COVID in the Kansas City metro area. So we still have to respond to the virus. That looks like more testing, and that looks like additional contact tracing kind of resources, something that the federal government has provided resources both locally and at the state for us to be able to do. So we got to make sure that we're implementing those things. And my job, if I was in the state legislature right now, would be to be yelling and banging on the drum for my constituents to, yes, be able to go back to work, but to be able to do so safely. Yes, to be able to go to the grocery store, but again, to do so safely. So first, we got to respond to the virus. Secondly, I don't think that we're really thinking through the economic scarring that shutting our economy down like a water faucet will have, because we can't turn it back on that way, right? And so I do think we have to think about investments, particularly in small businesses. I know you and I both take pride in the fact that thriving small businesses are a part of the fabric here in the Northeast area, and small businesses of every kind. If you haven't traveled down Independence Avenue to get some good grub or to visit one of our retailers, please do. We have 2 coffee shops now in Pendleton Heights. I will not say which one is best. One of them does have my initials, which I feel like is cheating, but both of them are great. And so I do think that we have to make sure that still that largest driver for jobs and workforce, particularly here in our community, is supported. And it's difficult for them to work through the regulations that is those kind of largely federal programs. And so we got to provide some more tailored stuff to the state end. And then lastly, there's always things we need to do about making sure that we're shortening the gap between workforce skills and what the actual workforce needs are. I worked at a great company. I loved it, spent great time there, but there were very few of us that were Kansas City products that were working at my company. And that actually can't be okay for the future of Kansas City businesses. So workforce development issues we need to work on, particularly supporting small businesses, growing education, and then lastly, making sure we're still responding to the virus.
A follow-up that I have on that as I'm listening is also just, I know that there's been some discussion on as funds, for these PPE and forgiveness, the loans that have been extended, they kind of went out the door in a pretty large format and not so much need-based or qualified-based. Could you talk to me a little bit about how, how would you see or treat businesses that are smaller or startups versus maybe more of those that are more established or mature? Any color of what you think is the right thing to do as we manage that?
Yes, and you hit it on the head. I think we sometimes, the small business definition is pretty broad. It's like employees less than 500, and I think $7 million of revenue, which is, I think, your local
pretty well.
shop is kind of like, I wish I was that big. So I think you're right. We do have to make sure that those resources are tailored. So what I'm a big fan of is CDFIs. They provide microloans, which are really tailored to those folks in startup positions. It's difficult for a large bank to make sense of providing a loan of $60,000. But often someone starting a business, that is actually what they need. And they also need some additional coaching and supporting resources to get their business off the ground. So I do think that we actually have to reinforce and support our CDFIs. Unfortunately, they were not included in the first couple phases of COVID relief. And so a lot of our businesses that were in that startup page missed out on those resources. And I think we're gonna find the payment for that, but it's not too late. We get second bites at the apple when it comes to making sure that we can support folks and make sure that those businesses that are even earlier in the incubation period are getting launched. And so I have a special place in my heart for those. Maybe it's the millennial in me, but I do think that if you can provide those kind of micro loan supports to smaller businesses, we actually can get them resources now.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to move to another thing that is, very much in the public spotlight right now. As many people already know, the George Floyd stuff that happened about a week ago, related to Black community and the police and excessive force and police brutality, has sparked a lot of dialogue that's much needed and has intensified that dialogue and put it really on the front stage. I'd love to just ask kind of, as we think about the loss of life, as we think about the current state of the community and the dynamics between minority communities and the police, as you've reflected on this, can you just talk to me about the reflections that you've had and things that you've been thinking through here?
Yeah, and I, like a lot of people, are still moving through them. My brain immediately goes to some of the policy things that we need, like local police control. It seems like we're going to get body cameras finally, and also civilian review boards for police misconduct. But I also think we need to step away and acknowledge that the George Floyd incident, unfortunately, is a pattern of several instances that we had over the past couple of years regarding interactions of the police, their use of force, and specifically Black men. And as a daughter of a Black man, a sister of a Black man, and a wife of a Black man, I understand their concerns when they see that siren in their mirror when they're getting pulled over by the police. And so I do think that here in Northeast, we've actually tried some of those antidotes, like I mentioned earlier when I was describing how we're a little bit further on that line than my neighborhood back home. Because I actually do think that we've made some attempts at community policing. I saw the same police officer at Pendleton Heights meetings presenting reports, and he knew and could refer to a good number of folks in the room by name. And that is actually something we want from our police force. We want them to be a partner to the work of making sure that our spaces are safe. And I think it's fair, and that if we in the words of Chris Rock, we cannot have one bad pilot. No one would want to be on that plane. The role of a police officer is so important in communities that we can't have one bad police officer on the street that doesn't understand appropriate use of force.
Something that I remember listening to the mayor speak about just a couple of days ago was in reference to something you had talked about, the body cameras, saying, hey, I would love that. But he made kind of a transparent remark he goes, but the city's broke, facing kind of what we talked about earlier, the COVID thing, having such an economic impact of lost revenue for cities and municipalities at all levels. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you may approach or navigate, trying to get these things done in decreasing budgets even too?
Yeah, and I think in the environment of decreasing budgets, that's when you really see what matters. And I dare say, and I probably would have said to Mayor Lucas, I was about to call him Mayor Q. He is Mayor Q. I probably would have said to Mayor Q if it was in that room that body cameras were important enough that we had to have figured that out before then. But it's okay, we figured it out now. And so I do think that we're entering into an environment where budget cuts are becoming real and we have to make some priorities. And I think it's always best to make sure that you're protecting underserved and disadvantaged groups first and making sure that you're prioritizing safety of life, communities, and those kind of bread and butter things like making sure that the trash is picked up and that our streets are clean, in addition to some of those overarching longer priorities that tend to get protected if they have really, really loud groups yelling for them at meetings when we're making budget decisions.
That's very good. Oftentimes I've heard that it's intensity that's what gets things done in the political realm. And so whatever is seen as most urgent is often what gets done. But there's a lot of important things to do. As the mayor talks about, he says, you got to learn how to chew and walk at the same time, though. We still got to do it.
We still got to do it.
Yeah. One of the last things before I jump into something that I'd like to talk with you about, I just want to remind people who are submitting questions. We've got a couple that have come in that are really good, but please do speak up and submit those questions. Rounding the bases on the first half of this town hall, I wanted to just talk specifically to a passion that I know that you have, and that is when it comes to the education and how all of this is impacting what has really sparked within you the reason why you want to go to Jeff City, is particularly, as I understand it, when it comes to primary education. It's so important. And I think the recent figures are that the funding could be scheduled to be cut at almost $133 million. And so could you talk to me a little bit about just the current education condition and what that means now, these budget cuts as we face the future?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying this. As a former educator, I tell people all the time, you go into the world of finance and they go, oh, that must be hard. And I say, you don't know the work of education, because that's actually where the real work is and where the hard work is. So shout out to all the teachers that are on the line, because I see you. I know it's kind of tough, and not understanding or knowing what the fall is going to look like is tough. It's also tough on parents. So I do think first, we're going to be in for a couple of changes. COVID has impacted kind of how the classroom is going to look, what schools are going to look like. And as someone who is on a board of a school, we're figuring that out. It's going to evolve as we get more information, but we're going to have to rally around our schools and our teachers to be partners in helping figure that out. When it comes specifically to the funding, I am anticipating cuts to education, which is sad. And it's sad because every time we keep a corporate loophole open, every time we do not make decisions to make a more progressive tax base, we always say it doesn't set us up to be able to respond to moments like this one. So I get it. I like low tax. Let me tell you, I like low taxes too. I would love to not have to pay property taxes to register my car. It was the strangest thing when I moved to Missouri and I had to pay property taxes to register my car. Like, that is not a thing everywhere. And so I understand the concerns that folks have when it comes around making sure they keep as much financial resources as they can to provide for their families and making sure that they're setting their families up for the future. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that folks are paying their fair share. And we have to make sure that we have multiple revenue streams to ensure that we're funding the things that matter. Like, I think we would agree that education is one of those things. And we're preparing our state to be on good footing, so that if we face an economic downturn and a reduction of revenues, which according to our Constitution has to equal a reduction of spending, we can still pay for the things that we know matter the most. And unfortunately, we're going to be in a situation of making really, really tough choices. So I will be banging that drum if I'm in Jeff City next year, which I hope that I'm making the case as to why I should be there. Because I understand and I get that world, and I also understand and get what it's like to make sure that you're setting yourself up for a really, really strong future if you have to make tough decisions in economic downturns.
One of the things that, budget dollars are so important, especially when it comes to critical programs. Like even as a neighborhood association, there's programs that the city has offered that we really rely on to help do our work to help improve our neighborhood. And so we're having to scramble to think about how do we, without certain funding, potentially carry on the mission. I'm curious to ask you, kind of as a follow-up, outside of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think is probably the next, or maybe even arguably more important thing to help the primary school system in this city, whether that be public or even charters or something like that? What do you think is beyond dollars, the things that are needed to help get schools really lifted to a higher performance and just making healthier students and that don't, hopefully experience some of the statistics that you said growing up where you did were normal for you?
Yeah, and I hate to say that if it worked for me, it can work for everyone. But I do think that I'm a good kind of test case is what we would want, right? I'm a kiddo that, according to my zip code, I was supposed to be in a completely different life trajectory than what I've ended up. And the thing that shifted that was, one, my parents were awesome, but two, a really, really quality education. And when I think about why my education was quality, it was a couple things. I had really, really prepared teachers that were fabrics of my community. I had many of the same teachers my parents did, which made parent-teacher conference pretty strange.
That's awesome.
Made parent-teacher conference pretty strange, right? Just because I knew my parents were not going to be on my side because they had Miss Jones too, right? They had Miss Smith too. So we were just not going to win that battle. So I think that that's important. High quality teachers are important, and we need to make it better to go into that profession. And so you'll see on my website that I do think that there should be additional tax credits for teachers, just because they provide so much of the very little income they already make on their classrooms. And we need to make that profession a little bit more competitive. The second thing I think is important with education is that we actually have to, again, shorten that gap between the skills that our kiddos have and the actual needed jobs and the needed skills to enter into self-sustaining and life-sustaining work. And so that looks like 21st century jobs that are both pandemic and recession proof. And that looks like making sure that kids are experiencing real world learning experiences quicker. Once I hit 10th grade, I had enough credits to graduate high school, but I could not graduate because you had to be older to graduate. And so in my school district, I spent half of my day in programs that were actually geared towards classes. One program I was in the firefighter academy, where I actually went and trained to be a firefighter, and that would have come with some additional supports if I decided to go into firefighting. I also had the chance to be exposed to college level courses in high school, and really the city of Chicago was my classroom, and that's something that we're replicating at the school that I'm on the board on. We think that that's important too. And so making sure that we are, one, taking care of teachers, making it a more competitive workforce, and two, making sure that our kiddos are set up for the jobs that they of today is how we're going to improve education and make it more competitive. I think if it was up to me, a lot more private schools will have to be fighting for access to kiddos. Those suburban schools will have to be fighting for access to kiddos, because my ORD crew that right now has no kids and one dog, when they have a child, they will still see Pendleton Heights as the neighborhood they want to be in because there's access to those high performing schools.
Yeah. Well, we're about at the time of halfway mark, and so I wanted to give an opportunity to hear some of the voices that have tuned in and have been kind enough to give us some questions. I've got a couple here. I'll just go ahead and read them as is. So how do you plan to work through the unfortunate Republican supermajority in the Missouri House? And what changes do you see as doable this session?
Yes, fight like heck. Right, which is good, right? And where's Michelle Obama? I'm from South Side Chicago. That's all you need to know about my ability to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think that regardless of where you sit, it's always a bit of a concern when anybody has a super majority of anything, right? I love cookies, but I don't need a super majority of cookies. And so I do think that you have to make sure that you're hearing the perspectives of folks across the aisle, because only that way will we get better, more comprehensive policies. So I actually plan on going there, listening, learning, and becoming a really, really good representative quickly, so that I actually can make those arrangements across the aisle to hopefully make progress on legislation. But to be fair, entering a job in the super majority means that my job will be to take bad legislation and make it less bad. And that is something that some of our other representatives have been pretty great at. And I would love to be able to join that kind of delegation of, again, just fighting to not make my experience ones of other people. You should not be on the board of Kansas City doing community service work and having to work around Jeff City to make Kansas City better. So that's how we would approach that. Fight like heck. I would say another word, but my mom is on. Hi, mom.
I'm kind of curious as a follow-up to that. Have you been in your prior career? You've been in lots of different roles. I'm wondering if there's anything situationally where you've been up against large insurmountable odds and have had to fight like that. Are there any situations that come to mind that would help prepare or be similar to the overwhelming opposition you'll probably receive?
Yes, actually. Chris, I told you you'd be good at this. You were all worried.
Hey, I like questions. Come
Yes,
on.
you're fantastic at this. Yes, actually, so when I entered my job, I was the first person that looked like me that was working in a role like the one I was working in. And I knew that there was going to be an opportunity for me to learn how to be able to engage with the powers that be, because I had to take opportunities into something called the investment committee in order to get them funded, right? And so what I did was, one, I built relationships. So those interactions were a little bit deeper than just the transactional nature of the work. Two, I identified the concern I had, which was, if you leave it up to its own devices, and I'm not going to be super nerdy, I also know you're in real estate, so you'll get this more than other people, but there are some ways that we look at real estate transactions in particular and don't identify the hidden biases of which communities we decide to make investments in. And I knew I didn't want to be a part of perpetuating that. So when we look at things like population density, when we look at things like household income, those things can actually curtail where you're making investments. And I didn't want that to be the case. So I got really, really good at making data-driven arguments, which was a language that the folks in the investment committee was more fluent in, and being able to engage on a terrain that allowed them to understand my perspective with hearing their language. And it was hard at first. Like, I felt like I was speaking in a different language, and I had to add those skills to be really, really successful. So yes, that is the one that comes to mind. There are a ton of stories around teaching where I felt like I was like knocking down the emperor's door. But it's worth doing. And when you're doing work that's connected to the people and community and making things better, it becomes work that fires you up whenever you hear no, instead of shutting you down.
I mean, that sounds pretty good. As far as I think you would probably be really good then. If you've done that already.
Well, here's the thing, Chris. There will be bad days, and when there's bad days, you, Annie, Spencer, and I are going to hop on one of these backyards and just.
If you need some encouragement of just hitting your head against the wall, then I will be a phone call away.
Yes.
We've got another question that came in here. How do you know who you are reaching, or that you're reaching really the neighbors in your district, since it's such a heavily multicultural area that speaks so many different languages and whatnot? That's something that I see that we are challenged with as a board of, we've got several, at least, different languages. And so how do you envision working through that thicket of sorts of language barriers?
That's a great question. Putting the responsibility on myself to make language not a barrier. And so one of the things that we need in order to be successful in winning in August is that I need the help of folks on this call. I need the help of communities of organizations in my neighborhood to help me get to Jefferson City. And one of the things that we're desperately in need of are folks who speak different languages in order to help me make sure that all folks in my constituency are being engaged, because that is their right. And if I'm successful, I will be responsible for supporting and representing their interest. So if you speak French, if you speak Spanish, if you speak Karen, if you speak Thai, if you speak Vietnamese, I would love to have you join the campaign so that we can make sure we're making those calls and making sure that we're putting materials in an accessible format for all the members of my district.
We've got another one that just came in here. Going back to the education conversation, what are your thoughts on current lack of funding that charters are receiving? It says that District 19 is home to the state's top charter schools. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the charter divide in public and how the funding works differently on that.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that it's a divide, right? If we go back to the purpose of charter schools, they're supposed to be places of inspiration, teacher and educator led, to be able to continue to grow the field of education. So I wish the divide wasn't a reality. And I think that my story positions us to be able to represent both of those interests and the interests of both of those families. I think all public schools are public schools and they should be funded equally. And so one thing I will do is making sure that there's actually a glitch in the charter funding that I will not get into here because everyone will leave me. But there's a glitch in the charter funding that I do think needs to be resolved, just because I want to make sure that all of the babies in my district have access to fair funding to be educated well. And so that's something I'll fight for. But beyond that, I will fight for increased funding for everyone. I hate the games that we play in Jefferson City to stop funding education at the level we're supposed to. We need to fully fund the education formula. We also need to fully fund transportation costs. There are 6 buses that come down my street to pick up kiddos in the morning, and they go to different schools. And that is a real expense that is unique to our landscape that we have to have supported in Jefferson City. So I'll fight for funding for all public schools, but yes, I also acknowledge there is an inequity in funding for charters that needs to be closed. And everybody agrees with that too, except my representative, unfortunately. Everybody else in the Kansas City delegation approved the charter glitch, except her, and that's unfortunate.
We've got, I think maybe time for like 2 more or so, maybe a couple, but here's another one that just came in. What are your top priorities for your district?
Some of the things that we talked about. We want a strong workforce, which is becoming even more important. We said that before COVID, but it's even more important now. So we want a strong workforce. Secondly, we want strong communities. Pendleton is amazing. Scarrett Renaissance is amazing. Indian Mound is amazing. Sheffield is amazing. Sugar Creek is amazing. So we want to make sure that those communities are getting the resources that they say they need in order to be successful. You mentioned that we rely on the city for a couple of funds. We want to make sure that particularly guns and blight are not things that are additional challenges for our neighborhoods. Lastly, strong education. And I've talked about that a ton, so I won't talk about it a whole bunch after that so we can get to a couple more questions, but we need to make sure that our schools are fully funded.
Making the community strong is like something that's so close to my heart. And so I love hearing that. I think even just the simple things of knowing your neighbors. I know it sounds super old school, but like being able to say, hey, I know that's Lisa and Jerry and they live on the corner or whatever it is. That sense of connectedness not only makes everyone safer, but more enjoyable. Like relationships are great. So I love hearing that. That's close to my heart.
They are. And I want to give a shout out to neighborhood associations. Like, I think ours is the best. That may not be the smart thing to say. I may get electrocuted.
I'm biased.
But I'm biased. I think Pendleton Heights is amazing. I keep trying to recruit my friends to move here. The rest of the district is awesome too. Don't get mad at me, Scarrett. Don't get mad at me, Sugar Creek. Y'all are great too. I love spending time out there too. But the work of neighborhood associations is an underappreciated resource. My large trash is picked up because of the work that y'all do. My park is organized. There's an organized park, be at the organized park cleanup on Saturday, which makes it a cool place for our kiddos to go. And also like the whole housing tours and just making sure that people are still recognizing the legacy of the area is important. So I know you don't hear that enough. Chris, keep at it. I'm happy you stepped up. Whitney was amazing. Those are big shoes to fill, but you're doing it.
I appreciate it. You're too kind. Got a couple more that just came in. So what's your favorite thing to do in the district?
So right now it's Cliff Drive. And I do it for a couple reasons. One, it's a cliff, y'all. So like there's actual cliff and people are crazy enough to climb this cliff, y'all. And so when I run down there and I see the folks climbing the cliff, I am just inspired by these people that decide that it makes sense to climb the cliff. So that is my favorite thing to do right now. My husband and I take a walk. Where I run, he walks, which is kind of the story of our personalities. Conversation for another time. But being on Cliff Drive right now is by far my favorite thing to do. I have this vision of someone taking the time to teach me how to play disc golf. I've also see that being done. I know we have an 18-hole course. It's amazing, but I have no idea how to do that. So I want to learn how to do that. But that's my favorite thing to do right now.
There is a lot to do, and a lot of Kansas City needs to rediscover the Northeast as a whole. I mean, yeah, I'm with you on I love Pendleton Heights, but I'm expanding my love more and more to just the whole Northeast. So anytime I can drag somebody's tail into our area, I try to.
Let's go ahead and do that Pendleton Heights advertisement. Y'all, We have the most green space of any area in the city.
It's true. Highest elevation.
Highest
True.
2, Kansas City Museum.
3.
Well, technically that's Scared, but whatever. It's next door.
It's
and
next door.
also in Scared, but they let us borrow it. We now have the Rieger Distillery, which is home to our cocktail hours. So if
Where can you go climbing on a wall, fishing in a fishing hole where the Parks and Rec stocks it with trout, and you can go walking? I mean, like, it's pretty great.
It's a great neighborhood. Y'all should come check it out. Okay.
A couple more, actually some substantive ones I want to get to. I think they're really good.
And
What do you think is
right. People just did 2, so I think we got time for 2 more.
2 more? Okay. What do you think is a piece of gun legislation, if any, that you could reasonably work on once you get to Jeff City?
I think everyone, let me take that back, because I said I was not going to be a person who is not completely truthful with folks as I'm interviewing to hopefully be their elected official. I think that a lot of reasonable people would agree that guns do not need to be in the hands of children, and guns do not need to be in the hands of abusers. Now, the trick is the how, right? So my job would be figuring out how can we work through the kind of current landscape in Jefferson City to get those 2 things considered. Because over 80% of folks agree that guns don't need to be in the hands of children or abusers. The thing that's already made traction that I would love to support is Blair's Law. Celebratory gunfire was a thing that I heard back home in Chicago. It is a thing that I hear too often here in Kansas City, and it is a very dangerous act. And so we do need to make sure that that's no longer a reality. I love it when the Chiefs win as much as everybody else. I love it when the Royals win as much as everybody else, but let's not celebrate that way, y'all.
Yeah. Let's end it on this one, actually, then. It's actually another thing that's close to my heart. When we were just discussing recently as a neighborhood what makes a healthy community, which is a fascinating discussion, period, full stop. I encourage everybody to actually really think about that. What are the ingredients? A person that I really respect, Adrian Hayes, or Hughes, I think it is, included communities of faith as a vital component of healthy communities. And so a question that we just received, I think, is right up the vein of that. It says, what role can or will communities of faith have in the election process and the work that they do once you're in office, Lord willing, to support or to help?
I think the question is an interesting one, because I do want to acknowledge that communities of faith have been very active in making sure that we're centering our political process in what matters. They serve as spiritual advisors for a lot of our elected officials. And as a faith motivated woman, I think it's important for me to stay connected to my community of faith so that I am fully grounded in the decisions I'm making, and making sure that I am putting people first, because at the end of the day, my opinion, to be a Christian is to be a servant leader. And that is something that I need to keep first in mind with doing that. And secondly, I think that we need to recognize and appreciate that our churches are often places of solitude and places of safety for a lot of communities that more often than not are not represented in the political process. So it would be my job to make sure that I am staying in touch with faith-based communities, because they know a lot of information. Frankly, there's 2 people who know a lot of information about you. Typically, they're your pastor and your therapist. And so I do think it's important for me to be sure that I'm understanding and getting all the information I can, so that I am being mindful of the needs of our entire community. And I think churches are a place for me to do that. But on a personal level, it's very important for me to stay spiritually connected as I'm going through this process. Politics is crazy, y'all. So Jesus
You gotta
is
be grounded in something.
Important. And Jesus may not be, you may not be a Christian. I completely respect that. But like, for me, Jesus is important. So I want to make sure that I stay connected and grounded.
Yeah. All right. We've got one more. I'm going to sneak it in, even though I said it wasn't the last one, but here it is. We talked we'll talk full circle, workforce development. I want to go back to that. When it comes to workforce development, it is important. And so what are your plans to make it better?
Yeah, one, we need to continue to fund programs that work. There are workforce development programs that work. They have the data to back them up. And unfortunately, Jefferson City likes to have them, fight for their funding every time, which burns resources and time from them. And so I think that we need to find those programs that are working and making sure that we're continuously funding them and funding them fully so they can continue to do that work. We also, again, need to make sure that we're fully funding schools as well, so that they actually can be a part of making sure that we're closing that gap between the skills that we need and the skills that we have.
Well, Phyllis, I think it's been about an hour, and we were going to
Oh,
honor.
wow, it's been an hour. I could have did this much longer. It's fun. It's a conversation. Good
We
time.
got to keep it to an hour to respect everybody's time. People might need to go get some dinner, some late dinner, whatever it is.
Dinner's real.
So
It's
I just
getting
want to
cold.
say thank you to everybody who's tuned in and joined. Thank you for the questions. I hope that you have found this informative. I think it is important to get to know as authentically as possible anyone that represents you or your district. To have kind of an open line of communication is invaluable, especially in times that are as chaotic and hard and challenging and sad for so many people with the things we've talked about today. So thank you for doing this, Phyllis. If people wanted to follow your campaign or stay up to date with you or support, what are ways that they can do that?
Yeah, one of the best ways in kind of our central hub is my website. I made it easy. It's my name, www.phyllis, Phyllis, Hardwick.com. On there, you can sign up to phone bank, you can sign up to send text messages, you can sign up to drop literature, and you can really be one of the kind of small army of volunteers that we're organizing to be able to make me successful in August. Also, I want to stay connected. I want to hear from you. And so the easiest way right now for us to do that in the time we're in is via phone or via email. I can't make those calls to you if I don't have your information. So on my website, again, you can sign up to get those campaign updates from me and making sure that I'm still working to earn your vote so we can be successful in August.
And what is it? The big day is August what?
August 4th, which is 3 days after my birthday. Y'all, there will be no better birthday present. I'm telling you.
I mean, that would be a great birthday present for sure. So
well, Chris, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you. I thank everyone who took their time to be able to participate on this. Hey, to the folks on Facebook, I've been told that you can see me. That is fantastic. Hey to the hey to the folks on Instagram. I've been told that you can see me too. I appreciate you. And to my Zoomers, thank you for logging in, being with us. Chris, doing amazing work. Support your local neighborhood association. They're figuring out how to get you dues through PayPal and all these other stuff. So they do great work, and I'm so happy that you agreed to come on and have this conversation with me today.
Well, that wraps it up for our time. Thanks to everybody, and thanks, Phyllis.
Thank you guys so much. Bye.
All right, take care.